Lehrman organization, which is a wonderful, as a former history teacher, the resources provided by Gilder Lehrman and the professional development is second to none. So after the nomination, she had to submit a lot of documentation, including lesson plans, and Jolie was selected as the Missouri History Teacher of the Year. So here's just a quote from the president of the Gilder Lehrman Association. Knowledgeable and impassioned teachers bring our country's history to life for students, allowing them to understand that engaging with history is about more than a series of facts. Teachers are the lifeblood of our students' education, and these are the best in the country. So this is the 20th year of this award, and we are so proud of Jolie being the Missouri History Teacher of the Year.
So do you have words for us, and can you come up and raise your hand so we can properly congratulate you? So what words do you have?
Who I am as a teacher is so I'm letting me be a part of this meeting. Yep.
Thanks,
Whole group.
Yeah, cover me.
Excellent. Continuing the theme of recognizing excellence. Next up, 6.3, student recognition.
So we'd like to introduce Ainsley Foster, who is a Smithville High School senior. She has just been awarded a $50,000 scholarship to attend one of 19 Kansas City or KC Scholars post-secondary partners. These scholarships are highly competitive and they're granted upon a very complicated application process to exceptional students. Ainsley has maintained over a 3.97 weighted GPA throughout her time here at Smithville High School. And so we are very proud of Ainsley because this is kind of a big deal to be a KC Scholar. So congratulations, Ainsley.
We won't put you on the spot and make you say something, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to. If we could shake your hands and congratulate you, I'd like to do that.
Have you decided where you're going to school, Ainsley? All right.
Wow. Gotta stay green.
Well done. Congrats.
Congratulations.
And
You know what you want to study when you go to school?
2 years.
Oh, awesome. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Wildlife ecology and conservation.
Okay.
Ainsley, the only thing that I would ask to do, because you brought an amazing fan club, would you mind introducing your special guest that you brought with you? Just a couple more, sorry.
Stand proud.
Stand.
You earned it.
Yes, congratulations.
You guys are big part of why she's here.
Congratulations.
You guys will, you do not have to stay if you don't want to, you can go. You are welcome to. But you have a couple days of summer left if you feel like you want to go.
All right, next item on the agenda, 7.1, adoption or modification of the agenda. There's no modification or adoption of the agenda. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, please vote. Excellent. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda, approval of consent agenda items. There are a number on here. There's no discussion on this. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented. So moved. The motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, please vote. Excellent. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda, 9.0, communications, 9.1, comments from the audience. We don't have any this evening. Always welcome. We welcome feedback from our patrons. 9.2, board priorities update.
Yeah, I wanted to share a little bit this evening about the progress I had made on my entry plan. Those are kind of framed in 4 different goals of academic achievement, connecting with the school community, as well as communicating effectively, and then working with my new 7 bosses on how to be an effective team. So made a lot of progress. I've been able to meet with several key people throughout the city. I had breakfast, or not breakfast, but had a several-hour meeting with the mayor earlier this month. Had been going to the chamber, joined Rotary as well. So a lot of that has been good. Just being present now that we have officially moved up, obviously, is a big step in that process. So that has all been very positive throughout this time. I also had the opportunity to get invited. Denise Hahn, who does our Pathways to Reading curriculum implementation, she does that training. It's a K2 reading program based on very much the scientific research around the brain research of a young reader, as well as what we know about creates that reading. It brings it all together. So I got to participate one morning with it. I believe it's a 4 or 5 day training. So it is very intensive. I found it fascinating how purposeful it was of taking research from basically healthcare, research from education, and combining it. One of the things that I did find specifically interesting is, of the group that was there being trained, and including Denise as the trainer, I was the only person in the room that had been explicitly taught phonics, which I thought was really interesting. That is part of Pathways to Reading. So that was great. It made me learn a lot. High school math teacher is my background. So that just gave me another lens to learn. I was also excited to share that Carrie Chambers, the new English language arts facilitator, participated in that as well. So great learning. I always appreciate joining with teachers and doing those things. And it was actually a conversation with Julie. She wanted to make sure that I shared that with the board when I had those opportunities, things that I did with teachers. So 2 thumbs up for the cameras that couldn't see it now. But I do want to make sure that as part of that entry plan, it is about doing things with our teachers and connecting with them and participating to learn more about their day in, day out lives. We have some information that I think Michelle will probably talk about during her part from our administrative retreat, but did want to share that we had 2 days where we met with our building administrators, had some time to collaborate, connect, and look back at last year's CSEP process based on the new MSEP 6 requirements, as well as look forward. Michelle brought forth some things that were some suggestions, and it was just really nice to have that team together. I want to especially thank Central Bank. They allowed us to use their basement on the south end of town for those meetings, and a very productive 2 days to be able to collaborate and with some new team members or team members in different roles to really talk, have those conversations and develop a vision for the school year. The other piece that I shared within this, Robert put together based on our demographic data over the last several years, probably over the last 10 years, really. It started with Mr. Kruger many, many years ago. Projected enrollment, we are trending really close to that way. We do have an official count day in September where the state does that. Is it September 25th?
Yes.
Is that okay? September 25th, where we will take an official student count enrollment day at that time. But as you can see here, you can see our enrollment. We are trending in the right directions. We've made some addition in class size just with hiring teachers to bring those down and provide support where we saw some pressures and needed a release valve. So I was going to share a little bit about the 2 hours we spent before this, but what I would instead do, encourage anyone that is here to look on the wall. From 4 to 6, Dr. White with EGL facilitated a session with us that built on the retreat that we had in June to further define not only gold priorities or board and superintendent priorities, but more specifically board and superintendent goals. What we want to accomplish, not only over the next year, the school year, but even breaking it down in the next 90 days within that. So rather than necessarily talk about that, I would be happy for people to walk around and look at that to see how it started very wide in the conversation. And then as a team really work that down to identify those really big pieces that we want to focus on throughout this year. And over the next month with the admin team, we will work on defining those tactics underneath those larger goals so we can ensure that we carry those out.
So for those at home who can't walk around and see them,
Yeah.
the broad buckets are academic excellence, safety and security, finance, community relations, and attract, retain, and grow staff. So we look forward to, those shared goals, getting those lined out and communicated out to our internal and external stakeholders. Any additional comments from the boards or questions?
I just find it, our 2 retreats now have been really valuable. I feel like we're all on the same page, goals, and I'm excited. I think that very valuable time, well spent.
I will plant the seed because you just said that. We find that time valuable. It's really hard. If you think about, it took us about 10 days to get those 2 hours scheduled. Potentially putting that flag out in a November, December timeline, or even January when we come right back to have that same type of conversation, even invite, we had Mrs. Quinley with MSBA come during that first session, invite either one of them back to continue that conversation. But it's hard to get that valuable time where you have several hours just to sit and talk and discuss versus what's the formality of our board meetings, right?
I love the idea of that, and particularly coming off of the MSBA conference where we get to learn some best practices from other districts and then potentially following up on that and sharing as a group. And then hopefully as a goal, maybe next year, we're presenting at MSBA on some of the great things that we've done. So throw that challenge out to this group here. Excellent. If there's nothing more on 9.2, we'll move on to 9.3, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services.
Thank you. We've had a lot of training going on throughout this summer and in the last couple of weeks actually to prepare for the school year. Just to give you a snapshot of that, our teachers have a professional development day that we call a floating PD day because it's not in our calendar. They get to choose that day. So we've had hundreds of people participating in a variety of sessions over the summer. The Pathways training that Mark mentioned was one of those opportunities. I'm really excited to see all of the learning that our teachers have done. The PE teachers had some flag football curriculum presented to them from one of our graduates just yesterday, and I've got a great little video that I'll share with you later. But so it's exciting to see them taking this opportunity to grow. And if they didn't like what we had to offer, there were other opportunities for them outside of the district. So I'll be sharing that data with you probably at the next board meeting. But over the last couple of weeks, we've had our new teachers. We had Kagan training, which is cooperative learning. The value to us of the cooperative learning specifically is the engagement that it promotes amongst our students. Also the critical thinking and practicing communication skills. It's also a great way to build community and team, a sense of team within a classroom. And all of the soft skills that we talk about that are important to employers, they practice that. They shake hands, they look at each other in the eye, they compliment each other, and they clearly communicate with each other. And you can't really hide from it. If you're not participating, it's pretty obvious. So we had not only our new teachers participate in that training, but if you recall last year, our trainer got sick. And they tried to get us to do a virtual, and we were like, no, we'll just wait a year. So all of our teachers from last year were also there. So we had about 50 people. And it was pretty fun to watch all of that learning going on, and definitely very engaging for the participants, just like it is for the students. We had our new teacher orientation last week. So we invited all of our classified and certified staff for breakfast and a bus tour on the first day. And then did what we could to build the foundation that our teachers need for day one. They had time at the district level. They also had time in their buildings, and they had time working with some of their colleagues on curriculum and lesson planning for the first week. In addition, our buddies and mentors who are supporting those people have been trained. Our PLC leaders, we have almost 50 PLC leaders. They were trained last week, reinforcing database decision-making, which is a big focus for us this year across the board. So lots of exciting time for fellowship, but also for learning. And it's just a fun time to be in the district for sure. Related to that, it has been our tradition before the September board meeting to hold a reception for our new teachers and administrators. So I just wanted to confirm that that is still your wish. Very good. I will work on an invitation for them, and we'll prepare. There are 26 of them, so we could probably have it in this space rather than having it over at the cafeteria. So we'll get that taken care of. And then lastly, unless you have any questions for me, I wanted to share the CSIP objectives that we have selected as an admin team to feature on our dashboard. If you recall, when we went through the MSIP cycle last year, we received some feedback on our CSIP, and one thing that and we did okay on, because we're constantly updating you in the board meetings about our CSIP growth, but they suggested that we actually make it more public and do some kind of dashboard. And then they said, pick 4 or 5 things that you want to focus on and continually update the community as well as the board. So we have picked 5 things. Under pillar 1, which is innovative faculty, we have selected objective 3, which is increase robust financial support to elevate the school district's competitiveness. And for that, we will primarily use compensation tracking and benefits as the data that we share on the dashboard. Under pillar 3, expand learning opportunities. Objective 1, commit to providing 100% of Smithville students a real world learning experience. We'll provide information on our career exploration activities as well as our MBA attainment. Under pillar 4, outstanding facilities, we're really just going to highlight that pillar, which is invest in future-oriented facilities that create adaptable, enticing, and livable learning environments. And for that, we thought it would be helpful with the passage of the bond to do some kind of a progress check on what has been completed, how much of the funds have been spent. So just providing updates related to that. For pillar 5, which is student-centered culture, we have selected objective 2, pursue sustained growth and sense of belonging for 100% of Smithville students. We have panorama data. We have CSIP survey questions that go out to parents, staff, and students related to a sense of belonging. And then as our work with POAC continues, there's a pre and post test that they have developed, and we could use that data as well. And lastly, under academic excellence, objective 2, increase math, ELA, and science achievement in the school district. For that, we will use NWA data, our pathways to reading data, which Mark mentioned previously. And then we will also feature our APR growth and status. And that actually is a measure of the MAP test. The MAP scores are what populate that. So yeah, those are the things that we'll be featuring on the dashboard. If you have any other suggestions of data for us to highlight under any of those objectives, I'd love to hear it.
So you mentioned it during our 4 to 6 o'clock session about how closely the strategic plan, the CSEP, MSEP, and these objectives all align. And I'm very happy to see that. So thank you everyone for the hard work on that.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? All right. 9.4, Executive Director of Support Services.
All right, thanks, Mr. Blumker. Wanted to start this evening, just give you a little update on construction. So Randy, if you wouldn't mind putting our little infograph up. A lot of projects that we try to tackle in a short amount of time to get it ready for the beginning of school. So that's always our goal. Okay, perfect. So I will start a little bit with just the sidewalks. So that's probably one of the most visible things that folks can see as they come into the campus. And so one reminder is that this is a collaborative project with the city. In other words, the city of Smithville has on their timeline that in the summer of 24, they're going to complete the sidewalk along Commercial. And so you might see sidewalks to nowhere right now. And you're like, well, why did they stop there? Why didn't they keep going? So we will give that easement to the city on Commercial, and they will look to complete their plan in the summer of 24. So that will all tie in nicely. But once you get to that point, all of our sidewalks tie into each other. The one up by Commercial that you see right by the marquee sign brings down and will take you down to the high school and then continue around to the middle school and will take you all the way down to Horizon. So
How does it do that?
yeah, so the reason it does S and it does give a different shape than just a straight line is we want to make sure it's ADA compliant. And to do that, we need to make sure our slope is around 5%. So that way somebody that would be in an accessible wheelchair would be able to use and go down or up in a fashion that would be safe. And so to get that slope that's required, we do have to take it and kind of snake it around. Someone kind of joked, why don't you just put an arrow through the middle, make it a logo? But that it does have a purpose. It's not just trying to be the Smithville S. It is there for ADA compliance. So we're very pleased. It's not done. Yeah, yeah, build some plants in it. You can see they're finishing up, putting some finishing touches on some different areas. So we anticipate all that being done before the first day of school. But we're very pleased with all the rain that we've had this summer and a lot of non-working days to be able to still be pretty close. So we're happy with that. So it looks like he has the picture up. And so some of the things that you see, I'll start with the transportation facility next. Right now, just moving dirt, trying to get that compaction of the soil the way they want it. So they can start putting down the headers or the footers later on and then the foundation. The second picture you see there is the new restrooms in the high school. So for those of you that came to the vendor fair and walked through the main area, you might have used those restrooms across from the gym. Hopefully the picture in person maybe looks better than what you see in the picture. So we did have a lot of outside visitors. So hopefully they were able to go in that area if they needed to wash their hands before they ate and get to see that new bathroom. So we're excited about that. And then the last picture on that slide shows our gym. So this summer is step one of step two. The first step is to knock out that mezzanine wall and then to laser measure the areas to make sure that we get the custom built bleachers the way they want. Step two is going to be next summer to where they put in the supports necessary underneath the locker room to hold a new set of bleachers and 500 people on top of those bleachers. That's where that weight comes in. And that's why you need to ensure that the structure underneath is there to support the weight. And then also we will redo the stage area and make that a multi-purpose room as well. So that will be step two. So people that walk in, today may be like, well, how does this really change anything? Well, it's hard to get everything done in one summer. So we split it up to be able to get it done in 2 summers. And also we couldn't do it in 1 summer anyway, because it took 6 months lead time to order those bleachers. And so that is complete. The gym is ready for competition this fall, and we'll be ready to jump in that next summer to totally get it finished out and increase that capacity of the gym. So Randy, if you could scroll down just a little bit, we can go down to the next slides. All right, so these are just simply the stairs. We had a lot of erosion problems on the visitor and home sides of our athletic stadium. And so what this does is it gives a actual true set of stairs with some railing. Our middle school uses our main athletic field a lot. And there were some old railroad ties and gravel with no rail, really wasn't safe. And then a lot of mud was washing down on our track. So while we're doing the sidewalks, they added those stairs. I think it will really help out those areas. So just kind of part of the sidewalk plan. And if you can go to the next one. This again shows more of those restrooms across from the gym. So go ahead and go. I think there's one more. Okay, so these are the areas, this on the left is where the mezzanine was. So what this will be in the future, and part two of what I talked about earlier, is the bleachers will be in the front part. There will be another wall in the middle of that where the bleachers will back up to, and behind that, so basically about half of the space will be storage. We are in desperate need of storage. The stage is actually a large storage space for a lot of activities and athletics. So with taking out that stage and making it a multi-purpose room, it takes away their storage. So perfect way to use that space that's going to be behind the bleachers is to use that for the storage we took away from the stage. So we're going to have some movable pods that can be locked up. Capital City and Jeff City use this system down there, and it works great, where you can basically rotate these pods through, and that way someone can have their own lock on their cage, rotate around, and then get to the space they need instead of having a bunch of separate locked doors or walls or shelves or things like that. So we're going to look to implement that in that space there. And then that right there is another just a sidewalk that we have on our campus, just completing that plan. So last but not least, we don't have pictures of, and this one is our HVAC. A lot of people think that the HVAC starts and stops with, hey, we pull the old units on and now we put the new units or old units off, put the new unit on, and we're ready to go. Well, that's actually where the work just begins. We have to go in and put controls on all the systems. They need to make sure that they're running efficiently and effectively, and that when they trigger a control, whether it's a damper, whether it's an energy wheel, whether it's the humidifier or dehumidifier, that when they do something in the program that actually triggers the HVAC system itself and does what it's asked to do. And so that takes a lot of programming, a lot of work, a lot of timing. And so they're going through and doing that right now. I would say they're probably 60 to 70% complete, not 100% complete, but they'll continue to fine tune that as school starts and into the first of fall. But the last part of that will be next summer with the VAV boxes. So they'll continue to monitor different spaces all year long and say, okay, these areas need those VAV boxes, and they're going to get those scheduled and designed this spring and then installed next summer. So that will be the last part of the HVAC. So it's not done. This is just the first part of getting the new units on and get them controlled and fine tuned, and then identifying those spaces that need those VAV boxes will be the next part of the summer. So any questions on construction?
Are the railings that are up on the stairs, is that?
Great question. Those are temporary.
Okay. I
Yeah.
told someone, I'm like, I think they're temporary.
Great question. So
No, and I'm like,
those are not really fancy right now. They're
okay.
just some 2x4s that's up for safety purposes.
Okay.
Is they get the permanent ones in, and then those will come down, and then they'll get the permanent ones up. So yeah, good question. Good question. Yep, absolutely.
And more so what we talked about, more for the community to know, it's not the intention of the contractors to be working on the bus facility after dusk.
That is correct. If anybody is on a skid loader or an excavator at 9 p.m., please call the police. That means that somebody has gotten in the equipment and is having a joyride. So if you see that going on, or call me. So please let me know if you see that happen.
Should be considered suspicious.
Absolutely suspicious activity. So if you saw that last night sometime around 9 p.m., yeah, definitely call police and call me, and we'll make sure that we get that stopped. So yeah, absolutely. All right. Next part to mention is transportation. So today, all the routes went out to parents. They were all emailed. They're also posted on our website for them to see the routes. And that was also posted on social media. So all those parents, got those routes today. I'm sure several principals probably got some calls about different routes that maybe the parent might not agree with. I'm sure Andre got some calls about some special ed routes that maybe was different than what was discussed with their meeting. So that way, that's good. That's why we did it early, so we could early as possible. So that way we could get those things cleared up. So that way next Tuesday when we start school, we'll have a smoother start than otherwise. And so one thing we are still short of is bus drivers. Just to warn you, there are still a couple routes that are double drops. So they will go and they'll pick up a neighborhood, drop that off at school, and then go get kids, like for example, Hills at Shannon, and then drop them. So it's not ideal. It's what we'll have to start school with. They have 2 employees that are close to getting their CDL. And so once those folks have their pass their test, they'll go ahead and put those in shadow them with other drivers until they feel like they're ready. And then they'll put them out on their own as well. So we'll be able to dissolve that double route and actually have a route in itself. We did that communication from MoDOT today that they will have construction going on past school starting east of WHB. We don't have a lot of area we have to travel east of WHB. It won't be as a major impact as it was last year, with it stopping at Mount Olivet when it did, but there will be just a slight, disruption for 92. It's unfortunately something out of our control. We have to just roll with the punches. So we definitely want to prepare with what they give us, but it'll have much less impact this year than it did last year based on the construction they're doing on 92. Any questions on transportation?
So since you mentioned it about some of those bus routes late, or if the bus shows up late, are the kids gonna be marked tardy?
It will not be marked tardy.
Oh.
Yeah, not be marked tardy. Would be an excused tardiness, and they would not be marked tardy if they're riding the bus.
Cause my power school would blow up for
Yes,
several
showing that
days.
your
Fine.
son or daughter is absent that first period, it shows excused.
Mention a route my kids on, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Last but not least, our facilities, getting ready for school. So some back to school nights on high school and middle school. I want to thank our maintenance, custodial, and technology for all the work they've done to get everything ready, especially considering we had construction going on and cranes on site for middle school and high school where they could not get in the buildings. And then trying to, take a floor down and rebuild it with wax when you're looking at temperatures that are 80, 82 degrees because there's no HVAC in there because they're pulling those off and putting new ones on. That also makes it difficult. And Mr. Bogart had to do a lot of different moving and shuffling and taking his teams at different places because they couldn't work on the high school, middle school until they had those units up and running and cooling. And then they could go in and strip and wax those areas. So Scott did a great job of maneuvering that. And we feel like our buildings, look great and are ready to go. Obviously, we have some loose ends to tie up with some of the dirt being moved around the sidewalk still. Some other areas, but overall, I feel really confident going into this school year. Any other questions from any of those topics?
All right, then you need a drink of water before we move on to 10.1,
Financial review?
financial review.
Yeah, so early in the budget cycle. And so the numbers in there that you can see are mainly balances and then percent of budgets that has been spent so far. Just a reminder that next month, we'll be sharing data about our ASBR, which is the annual school board report that talks about FY23. We'll also have our tax rate hearing. And so our tax rate hearing, I do have an agenda item to talk a little bit about that. We'll set our tax rate for this next year based off assessed valuation from the 3 counties, Clay, Platte, and Clinton, and the AV numbers that came in for that. Of course, anytime you have AV over certain values, you have the Hancock Amendment, which will have us lowering our levy, and I'll get into those details in that agenda item there. And then, of course, in October, you guys will have your second budget revision. Your preliminary budget is kind of your first budget revision. So the October meeting will be your second budget revision. At that point, we'll have a very good idea on enrollment because we'll have passed September 25th, which is the count day for our students. We'll also have our tax rate hearing set. So we'll know exactly what our tax rate is and all the dollars that will be coming in anticipated for local effort into Fund 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we'll also have a lot of our staff movement. Back in June, we didn't have all of our staff hired. Now we have a lot of our staff hired. We know, what they are for their range and step. We also know any additional education that those staff members might have got over the summer to put them in different spots on their salary schedule. So that second budget revision gives a much clearer picture of what the year will look like when in June you're making a lot of estimates based on things you don't know yet, because we didn't know AB, we didn't know, some of the salaries of people coming in, leaving, late hires and things like that. So much clearer picture in that second budget revision for you guys to take a look at and ask any questions.
Questions, comments, concerns? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 10.2, updated program evaluation schedule.
So I have modified the November dates to be the first Wednesday of the month rather than the first Tuesday so that you all can go and vote. So for this year, that'll be November 8th. And then for next year, that'll be November 6th. Other than that, the program evaluation is the same.
Any questions on that? I think that was info only, right? All right, then we'll move on to the next item, 10.3 substitutes.
Yeah.
In your packet, there's information that was requested on some analysis of our substitutes. Time to answer any questions that you might have. Report.
And I'd like to compliment Kim and what she did with this, is kind of providing different options as you look at it. And one of the things that I think is important that she's identified throughout the last year is our nurses used to be lumped with our support staff. She's pulled that out because gotten some feedback, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we have some nurses that would be willing to come in that have a full-time nurse job that would be happy to be our sub nurse for that. They struggled a lot with the 100, and I think the 120 would be a much better option, knowing that I believe we pay 145 when we bring in an agency. So I really appreciate your work on this and providing a variety of options in that. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is exactly what, you know, I was looking for. I know that clearly shows us where we're at and where we could be, and what the cost of each line item is. So it definitely brings better clarity to what, you know, we could go, what we could get for the investment and what we're gonna go, what we could go after. It lists out the options. So thanks for putting that together. I know it was time consuming, I'm sure. So thanks for doing that.
No problem. We wanted to really focus on the Northland 6 so that we could look at our true competitors in the area.
I think it's interesting to look at the field internally too, to see, you know, we're thinking currently they would get $17, $83 an hour. And if we could increase that to $25 an hour. Cause I do know it is very hard when staff have to take their time and cover for somebody else. So to me, that's a benefit that helps the staff that are doing it.
Agreed. We know their time is valuable, and for them to step up and step into a classroom when they could be grading papers or planning for their own classes, we felt like that would be a good investment in our staff.
Questions?
On, you've provided to us before a breakout by month on fill rate. Do you have that information by building? Because also in one of your explanations on some of this stuff in the past, it's been noted that school activities is one of our hurdles that we have to get past. Obviously, you know, we probably know what schools that might be related to, but we've also had issues at FMLA and stuff like that. So I just didn't know if you had that broken out by building, if that's easy, if that's too hard.
We can't break it out by building. I don't currently have it broken out by building, but we can do that. We can take a look at that.
Okay. I think that'd just be good information to have. And are we just gathering more information on this subject matter tonight, or what are we doing here?
I think we listed it as info action. If there was anything that you wanted to take action on, somewhat, I think the request and the conversation I was having was, could it almost look like a buffet where you kind of take things out? It's also listed just as info. If you would like us to go back and gather some additional information before that September 20th board meeting, we would be happy to. Obviously, Kim's already volunteered herself to do some of that. So would be happy to as well.
Do we have an idea of, like, you know, we have the regular teacher sub and the retired teacher sub, those two buckets. Do we have an idea of, I would assume the regular teacher subs is a larger pool of people to pull from, but how much of that, those pools are we utilizing more retired teachers than regular sub teachers?
Over the last couple of years, we have utilized more retired teachers. COVID was kind of a lull in that. And then prior to COVID, we had quite a few retirees substitute in the district.
Yeah, you know, looking at like our rankings of, you know, where we're at today and where we could be, obviously the retired teacher stands out as a potential opportunity to have a substantial jump in, you know, a smaller investment and a greater return, being that we have we're much more competitive. Whereas, you know, the regular teacher, we still rank sixth. So,
Well,
And
to
I-
give, I
please do-
apologize,
no.
to get a retiree, you know, back into the district, whether it's someone who retired from Smithville School District or another school district in the area, I mean, that brings so much value. to
Sure,
our
yeah.
Classrooms with experience, classroom management,
Yeah.
the skill set that they bring. So
Which-
it is definitely a good way to invest our dollars.
And I would share, Patrick, to your point on the regular substitute pay, that still leaves us 6 out of 6. I believe we're $3 behind Platte County. So it brings us much closer.
Sure.
And the reason that we're $3 behind, Platte County does their sub-rate based hourly versus we do it as a day.
Okay.
So sometimes it's just little things like that, or it's 125. So it puts us still puts us last, but puts us more competitive.
and I wouldn't want to be, I don't really like being reactive. I'd rather be proactive, but I mean, one option that we would have now that we have the information, in a really digestible form, is one thing we could do is get into the school year and see if this issue really becomes the burden that it has become the past few school years, and be able to possibly jump into a quicker action into trying to resolve it. But I don't want to put a reactive burden on you guys to where you're fighting through something before we can take action on it. So
Go ahead.
I appreciate kind of the buffet, you know, to know the needs and, I think the field internally upping that pay, I think, you know, we've made it pretty clear, that we need to, increase compensation for, our teachers. That's a priority right now. And that's a way that we could
Mhm.
make that happen and hopefully, fill two problems with that. So.
Yeah, you know, from my standpoint, thank you for the line item breakouts, but you know, the investment prioritization to our staff covering needs and then retired teachers covering needs, I'd be in favor of voting on now.
Mhm.
In addition to the return delta between subs for nurses and contracted staff, there's a clear opportunity to me, which financially makes sense to move on now. And then in the other camp, with the regular teacher substitute, I would be curious to kind of go through the year and see and kind of just keep a pulse on it and keep a metric on it to where we have a plan in place, but do we need to initiate it right now and incur that cost right now?
And so people understand, I mean, the total estimated cost of that specific item would be 48,000. So when we're sitting up here discussing it, we're saying, you know, picking and choosing what priorities are. So that's why we're breaking it apart this way.
Yeah. How large is our pool?
Our pool, it sits around 100 people. And probably half of those actually get in the building on a regular basis.
But that's a little bit better than last year.
A
A
little bit.
little bit better than the year
We've already
before.
started, we've had our first substitute onboarding. And we always try any student teacher, we try and get them, also to go through that so they can step in, should we need them. But we've already, last year, we didn't have any, applicants for substitutes this early, so we've already started that process. And I will give, Chris a shout out. We put out the sign out front. And we've already recruited a couple of substitutes off of that, a nurse substitute, and then we've had just today an instructional assistant applicant.
any of these items that we would vote on would be non-budgeted, right?
Correct.
Yep.
So we would be potentially into our deficit.
Correct. I think you will be pleased with the ASBR numbers. It's preliminary right now. It's not certified.
Sure.
But I think you'll be pleased with FY 23's numbers, and full report will be in next month's meeting.
Yeah.
But I feel really good about.
So any of these items you would be, from a financial standpoint, fairly comfortable absorbing.
I would.
I would also note to your question about budget, it is not budgeted.
Yeah.
We also budget for 100% fill.
Correct.
which is never the reality. So there is some room, some play in that as well.
And as another incentive, we give, is it $50 for 5 days in a row? What is that incentive?
So substitutes are paid every 2 weeks. And so if someone subs more than 5 times in a 2-week period, then we will do the additional $50.
That incentive's only been around for a couple of years.
Couple of years.
Did that improve things when we put that?
It did, and it helped us to recruit those permanent substitutes, someone who's in the building on a regular basis. It definitely helped us fill those positions.
Is there, that doesn't appear to be a line item on here. Is that something for us to consider as maybe increasing that incentive more than $50? I don't know. I'm just saying.
I didn't.
If you're
consider
saying that, if you're saying that showed positive results, I'm interested in positive results.
It did show positive results in getting us those permanent subs, which for us is having someone in the same building either 2 days a week or 3 days a week consistently. And so they show up and we have a job for them no matter what. I think that takes some burden off of our building administrators and those admin assistants scrambling to fill.
But you move them into the long-term teacher substitute or support role at that time, don't you? Is that not-
No,
They have to be in the same role for that same time frame to be long-term, right?
Okay.
right. It is different.
Okay.
Yeah, the perm, we just mean they come in on a regular basis. It's so they're not random and just pick up jobs here or there. A long-term substitute is when we have a staff member, if it's a long-term teacher, if they're out for more than 10 days, then that long-term rate kicks in. So on day 11, it goes from $100 a day to $200 a day currently. And that's because if that teacher is out for that prolonged period, then they take on all of the responsibilities of that classroom. Lesson planning, grading, everything that goes along with that. So that's why there's an increase in pay. What we currently do not have is a long-term rate for our support staff members. If a instructional assistant is out for a prolonged period of time because of a medical condition or rehab or something, no matter what it is, that substitute is paid just the regular daily rate, even if they're there 11 days or they're there 30 days. And so one of the proposals on the document that you have is to give that a little bit of a bump to someone who's filling in for a support staff member who's out for more than 10 days in a row. We know that if it's an instructional assistant, they're supporting a classroom and there needs to be consistency there. They may be one-on-one with the student. They need to build that relationship. And so it encourages someone to take on that long-term role during that staff member's absence. So there's some differences in that.
Can you explain that again, Scott, that incentive? Is it $50?
Okay, so the $50 is if a substitute picks up sub jobs. And so one day they might sub for a teacher in 4th grade at Maple. Another day they pick up a job for 5th grade at Eagle. So they can pick up random jobs.
Yeah.
But if they are in our district 5 times or more in a 2-week pay period, they get that additional $50 at the end of that 2 weeks. So that way we encourage them to be in our buildings and in our district more rather than going over to Liberty or Park Hill or another district nearby, picking up jobs. We know in our system, we can see if someone else is using the frontline platform that we use for our substitutes, we can see where they're subbing sometimes if that district uses that same platform.
Okay.
A lot of districts don't. They may contract with Kelly Services or some other organization, but if they're using our system, we can see where they're at. And I'll be like, darn it, they're over in Kearney today or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
we want to entice them to be here in our district.
Yeah, it certainly seems if we had some positive results, to Scott's point, attacking that would be something that could increase for the other people that, we could promote that, and maybe that's another option. especially if it works.
gonna be added to the buffet.
Absolutely.
Does each building have a set permanent sub right now for every day? Do you have the, okay, what? Or whoever wants to answer.
I can check. I can check. We're working on that. We've been calling subs and inviting them to be permanent subs and explaining what that means. We're working on the spreadsheet. And the building administrators and their administrative assistants have that. The goal is to have a permanent sub in the building every day. Each building, the high school, we try and get at least 2 permanent subs. But again, we have to use a variety of people, because we don't have a full-time substitute, because then we would be paying benefits. So we use a couple of people or more to fill those different days.
But it's helpful too for that sub to have a set schedule every Monday I come in. So if
Mhm.
anyone's listening wants sub, that's a great option. Like you have a set
Yeah.
schedule, but still flexible.
Right.
Get to know the kids and the
Yeah.
staff in that building. So yeah, it's been successful. I feel like it's been successful. Very successful.
All head shaking.
So it sounds like there is some appetite to maybe pick some things from the buffet this evening. Someone like to,
Well,
Mr. Saxon, you started kind of.
I guess I got one other question. I'm sorry. Sure. The field internally, from 17 an hour to 25 an hour. Is that enough? Do we have a sense?
It's competitive with what other districts are doing. Most districts are sitting at the last time we checked around 20 to 25. You know, my goal is always to set the standard. So if we wanted to go higher, but it is very competitive with other districts.
Hey, Kim,
I can't speak to all 6, but I know that would match North Kansas City and I believe be a couple dollars more than Park Hill this month. Last time I looked, to your point.
hey, Kim, didn't you match that to other activities that teachers do?
Right. So if someone comes in and they spend an hour in a meeting or other things on our supplemental pay schedule, it's $25 an hour. So we tried to align it with that as well.
Mm.
Thanks, Rob.
That makes sense.
My last question I have is, and I don't know, have we, with the cadet teaching real world learning opportunities and they mix in, are they allowed to fill avenues or is that outside? I didn't know.
They don't have sub certificates. That is actually an industry recognized credential now. And so when our cadets finish their senior year, we would like them to do that. Then they have that as they go into college and it counts as an industry recognized credential, but they aren't allowed to sub.
Prior to the strict.
And while they don't come in and sub and get paid, they did come in and allow Matt Glover to come in and work with several teachers. And then they created a lesson, but they worked in pairs and there were also adults there to support them. So there's different ways to use them. It's just not a compensation thing for our high school students currently.
I would be happy to make a motion that we approve a retired substitute, retired teacher substitute, long-term teacher substitute, long-term support substitute, nurse substitute, and field internally rate adjustments as presented in this document.
The long-term teacher substitute, there's no change to it. So
Good call.
You can approve.
we can't approve to keep it there, I guess. We'll keep it at 200.
I will say also that is something that Kim and I and Robert all talked about potentially ways to promote that. I don't know if there's the awareness of what the compensation is for that. And we know how valuable having a retired teacher in for those long-term things to do a farther reach, just the same way that the sign has gotten so much traction just this week, using that system as well to gain traction.
So I'll second the motion. Additional discussion?
I had one, you said that our retired teacher substitute pay would put us tied for second because we're $3 short.
Sorry, the top one.
Okay.
The retired teacher sub, we would be tied.
Yeah.
With Liberty, North Kansas City, Kearney would all be there.
Do you know what number one? I mean, if it's like,
I'm gonna call in
so that
HR.
we could say we are to all retired teachers.
Yes,
It was
you-
around 140 to 150, I believe.
and we can bring that back if you would like
Whatever
us
it
to.
Who is it? Is it?
Kind of, that's pretty important too.
Excelsior?
Excelsior used a lot of ESSER funds towards that, which will dry up.
I guess the other thing is, once we approve these changes, if we start making it a routine of measuring if it's been successful, if it's not,
I agree.
going forward.
I have that number. So Park Hill is at 140. And then, North Kansas City is 130, and that's where we would be tied with the other districts there. The highest is 150, and there are 3 districts in the metro: Center, West Platte, and Belton.
You're right.
I'm just saying, why don't we at least do that?
We-
So we got a motion and a second to approve, as it was kind of lined out in, Mr. Saxon's motion. I, very clearly am hearing that we'd like to continue to monitor this and, particularly as we start the school year on a monthly basis and get some updates on how it's going.
Is there a
We amend,
Can we at least like 135?
we
I mean,
can.
go to
I'm
one
not saying-
thirty-five?
she wants.
Just saying, why don't we at least number 2?
Separate ourselves
Yeah.
from the
would
pack.
like to Possibly amend the motion.
Do we need to cancel this vote and restart a motion?
Sorry.
There are a couple different ways to do it. I think if we want to hear what it is, then you amend your motion and
Well, What would you like amended,
Go ahead.
Station? Whitney?
What
They'd like to separate ourselves on the retired teacher sub pay. They'd like to separate ourselves from a
From one,
tie to standing alone.
so instead of 130, 131.
Well,
What
I
is
don't
what
feel
she
like
said?
I'm the
So-
one,
Like
so we're clearly second.
131.
like 135. I mean,
135.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not the number up. The-
Board
Gi-
President, I'm
given-
going to amend.
Given
my
what the
motion.
estimated cost is, if you break that down, even going
135.
140 is not a huge
It's not.
difference overall. It would be roughly
Okay.
$500 or so.
Yeah,
There we go.
I would like to make a motion that we approve
So amend your motion.
to amend my motion.
Do you want that number? I can give you that number.
I'm just gonna throw 140 at it.
Okay.
Wait, no, don't do 140 because then we're
So
tied with.
every
$141.
$10 we increase.
Hide it
it roughly
first.
$30, is that right, Ron?
140.
Here, so,
Change it to $9,200 is the cost to go from 130 to 140.
okay,
30 to 140.
Those are estimates on what we've had for the last 3 years for retired teachers in our classroom. Could that go up or down as we increase this number?
Absolutely.
Yes, but
how
it's a
much
good
is
estimate would be $9,200.
9,200.
69, 69 to 92.
Tied for first is better than tied for second.
I'm willing to take advice from the group.
Sold.
I'd like to amend my motion with respects to row 3 retired teachers to adjust the rate of pay from 130 to 141.
And I amend my second.
There we go.
Okay.
So what was that? 130 to 140?
140.
141?
We want to be first.
He doesn't like.
Top pay.
Hey,
Now,
Tim's
we
nine.
do need to make that known.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Communication.
$9,246 just. to make that one, yeah.
Okay, does everyone understand the motion?
Yes. You want me to read what I know?
Please do.
Okay.
yes.
Yes,
So-
make sure you got it.
You're the most important.
Paying
person.
the teachers for filling internally, $25.
Correct.
Paying more for retired teachers to sub to 141 per day. Long-term classified to 140 per day, is that correct?
Correct.
and then nurse substitute to 120 per day.
I think that's
That's correct.
what I understand.
And the
Okay.
filled internally is per hour.
Per hour.
Per hour, yes.
No, it's higher than the regular sub. Yeah, that was for the retired.
Okay, if there are no additional questions or orders to add, please vote. All right, motion carries 7-0, and we'll keep this on the agenda and continue to update as we move forward. Thank you all very much for a lively discussion.
So you'd like to have me bring the data back in September?
Yeah, let's keep tracking on where we're at and how we do.
And I think in your monthly report that you were working on for the Friday update, it would be fantastic having there so they could always searchable and bring back to
Keep
it.
it fresh.
Yep.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep, thank you.
I know we touched on it earlier, 11.1 preliminary tax hearing information.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Blumker. So on the documents that are shared in that agenda item, one of those is a notice of a 2023, 2024 tax hearing document that is going to go in the Courier Tribune over the next couple of weeks. And that is required by statute for us to let our patrons know about our tax hearing that's coming up in our next board meeting, which is 7 p.m. on Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. And it also shows some required information that our patrons would like to know. One of those main ones is our assessed valuation and how that went up based on the reassessment cycle that we just went through. So if you could focus on the current tax year 2023, you can see that real estate came in at just over 331 million and personal property came in over 70 million for a total of $402,040,205. Now, I do want to note that there are 3 counties that make up our school district that contribute to our local tax effort, and that's Clinton County, Platte County, and Clay County. Clinton County and Platte County have given us final numbers, which are post-BOE numbers. BOE stands for Board of Equalization, and that is part of the process that hears appeals for folks that believe that their property taxes were too high and they appealed. So all those appeals have happened in Clinton and Platte. They've given us those final numbers. In Clay County, they're a charter county. And so therefore that process is drug out further. And so I still have pre-BOE numbers from Clay County. So I anticipate Clay County's numbers coming in a little bit lower, some of those appeals being granted and that number to come down. So that 402 number that you see, and my estimates will come down slightly, not a lot, but it will come down a little bit. And so you can see the previous tax year was at just over 347 million. So that's a 15.8% increase in assessed valuation from the previous year. So that is, that is, as far as revenue comes for a school district, that is good. But we are, again, under the Hancock Amendment that says we can only realize the lesser of 5% CPI or how much the assessed value grows. Well, of course, we grew 15.8%. CPI was at 6.5%. So 5% is the least of all those values. So that's what we're going to be capped at for next year. So as that number comes in for post BOE for Clay County, those could slightly adjust those tax values that you see here. So when I have my presentation in September, you might see those adjust very slightly. And when I mean slightly, I'm talking pennies to hundreds of pennies in those numbers. And so you can see how those funds would break out from revenue from fund 1, 2, 3, and 4, 10, 20, 30, 40, what type of revenue that brings in and the tax rate that each one of those would carry. The debt service you can see would be 1.2524. Debt service is not regulated by the Hancock Amendment. And so with that, there is a ceiling calculated for that. And so that has to be high enough to make sure that we can take care of our debt obligations. And at that level, it would. Of course, our operating fund, which make up 10, 20, and 40, make up the other piece of that tax rate. And so that is affected by the Hancock Amendment and what that comes out to be and is calculated. The other document that you see in there is the tax calculation sheets that is given to us from the Missouri auditor. And so we go through those tax calculation sheets, we put in all the assessed valuation information, and it basically calculates what that revenue is going to be based on your AV numbers and that realization of only 5% due to the Hancock Amendment. And so those are in there as well for you to see. We also utilize Raymond James, who is our bond underwriter. They also, look over the numbers as well. And so they have basically given their stamp of approval of, with the current AV, that's what your numbers will be. Of course, as that adjusts from Clay County giving us their final numbers, then we will be have those final numbers set for you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Of course, that tax rate hearing again to set that will be next board meeting in September. And by then we will have those Clay County numbers and we'll be able to give you those finalized tax rate. Just to summarize, our tax rate for last school year or last year was 4.8404. And so our preliminary estimated tax rate based on AV numbers would be 4.7504, which would be a 9-cent reduction from the previous year. So we'd be moving our levy back 9 cents based on previous year's tax rates. So that's from the effect of the Hancock Amendment. One thing people don't realize is if we ever had a negative AV, which we did back in 2010, 11, and 12, Hancock Amendment can actually help you and bring those levels back up because you went down in AV. So it does work both ways. Of course, most years your AV goes up, not down. So be happy to answer any question you guys might have.
Yes, good
4
explanation.
years,
and
but I finally understood that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Sure.
Having sat through, I don't know how many of the tax hearings, it's
Yeah.
one of the most exciting meetings of the year, right?
Yes, they are.
So-
Very exciting.
Excellent. Well, you can mark your calendar for September 20th for that.
I would just like to share, this is one of the things I've shared with you guys. Finance is one of those things that as a superintendent, you have to learn usually really quick on a very fast pace. And I appreciate all of Robert's help through this process, all of support as I've been learning this on the academic side. Most of the time you're focused on spending all of that money and not on the other piece of that, but do appreciate that. And also sitting down with Raymond James earlier this week, it was great to have Dr. Reich, the former superintendent of Platte County, which he did not wear orange. I'm happy to share during the meeting, but he was good as well, really knowing the local area, being able to share some insight, different things that they had done to strategize over the years in Platte County to be aggressive with compensation, those other things that really mimic the conversation during our retreat as well. So I appreciate the help during this time.
And final note, I guess, in the preliminary budget in June, we anticipated AV being so high and CPI being so high, they would realize 5%. So what we have here is no different than what we anticipated in June for what we figured would come. We knew we'd have to roll that back. We knew it'd be about that amount. And so no surprises here basically from what we'd have on our tax rate thing.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 11.2 MSBA policy DFI 2, setting the tuition for district programs. We moved this from consent agenda to kind of highlight this policy discussion on it, also kind of just start to think through, what that looks like depending on where we go as a district in terms of what a tuition rate would look like. So with that, any additional comments or questions on this one?
The only thing I would share is that there are other districts that do allow tuition-based enrollment in the Kansas City area. It is the practice, I believe, of most Northland to not do that. I don't know post-COVID whether that will continue to hold true or how districts will adjust. The one that I know that allows, at least Summit is one that has always allowed it as part of their process, but thought it would be good based on our initial conversation of that's not necessarily taking any action for this current school year, but something to potentially discuss in the future. So
On the precedent has been set in the Kansas City area, but not in the north.
yes, and by precedent, Lee Summit's been doing it for you. Yeah, it's been very common. They're not the only one.
Okay.
That's the one I'm familiar with. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with others that are, but
They have a lot of participation. I'm just curious.
it is a super high. It's when I last looked, it was $20,000.
Okay.
So it was a little less than Rockhurst.
Okay.
Or I shouldn't say Rockhurst, it's a little less than Penn Day.
Yeah.
Is what it was. So
I was gonna say to do the tuition, you have to, because we get no taxes from them,
Mhm.
so it would be the extra that, okay.
There are no additional questions or comments. I'd entertain a motion to approve the policy as presented.
So moved.
Your motion, do we have a second? Second. There's no further discussion, please vote. So that rate for folks at home, $11,666.56. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. 11.3, high school HVAC proposal.
Yeah, so this proposal is a follow-up from the last month's board meeting in regards to the two HVAC units we identified at the high school that we would like to replace. And one of the big reasons for those rooms is humidity. Those two units sit over our choir room and our band room. And we have a lot of different wardrobes, equipment, and things like that that over the years have cost the district operational dollars to, whether it was clean, dry clean, repair, take off patina, things like that that you get when you have high humidity and you have brass instruments in those areas. For this last bond project, we did a wholesale school at once. We did, Horizon all at once, and we did the middle school at once. The reason that the Smithville, the history of that was, back in the early 2000s, we would get a lot of savings on different construction projects. And so whatever savings was, we would do that to do HVAC instead of having a planned deferred maintenance plan like we did with roofing. As you can see, the trend with inflation, wage inflation, there's a lot less savings that you see when you do construction projects. You get more interest earnings now, but a lot less savings and sometimes overruns that you've maybe have heard of other districts around us. And so I don't see that as a viable option going forward to do wholesale savings projects with HVAC. And so that's why we had to do it as a big project with our bond. So what we'd like to do going forward is to do deferred maintenance with our HVAC and look at a couple units a year to continue to look at what's our highest work orders, the issues we're having the most conditioning problems in those rooms, and to identify those and get those taken care of. And so this proposal has those two units to be replaced. That's about a 6-month lead time from a purchase order to delivery. And so we'd be looking about around probably a spring break timeframe to put those on those curbs above those classrooms. So that way it'd be ready for the summer and the humidity that comes with that to condition those rooms so we don't have those issues like we had in the past. So that proposal does show the price of those two units. The $239,000 plus is budgeted into our capital projects amount in Fund 4 already. And so for that line item, there's $380,000 budget for that. That did include that amount. So this would not be increasing our budget. If we didn't do this, we'd either be reducing our budget in Fund 4, which does not count with our reserves, or we'd be looking for other projects that maybe are more important. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions on this.
I guess my only question, is there a reason we're just continuing doing the remote treatment units and not like a large air handler with demand flow? So if we know we're gonna have future expansion needs, why would we not just spend the cost to put the air handler in place and run the duct?
Sure.
Fact.
With this existing space, I think a lot had to do with what was already existing and what they replaced it with versus having a new space. Correct. Having new spaces, obviously those things would be evaluated and looked at. So they try to keep the cost at a minimum and just do unit for unit, but this has some of the humidity controls, energy wheels, and other things that is going to help that space.
So I guess what I think would be helpful, Robert, long term is when you look at your deferred maintenance strategy related to HVAC, like for like cost value from 5 years out, that's our strategy versus a centralized air handling unit.
Right.
That's working, because there's going to be a delta cost
Sure.
difference 5 years down the road.
Right.
And understanding that impact, because RTUs might be cheaper, I have no idea.
Right.
But there's probably a different comparison there.
Sure. We do have a smorgasbord of different type of style of units on the high school. So there's, you have your, oh gosh, I just went blank. Your VRF over the new units, which has caused all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
Those
are fun.
Yeah. And of course, then you have your ground RTUs on our activity center, which have been great, especially for maintenance. And so there's definitely an evaluation of every single space at the high school because the original space was 1969. And, we have new spaces that have VRF that were just built, 5 years ago. So.
Yeah. So just quick for everyone who cares to care, but we're talking the differences. Remote treatment units supply specific space condensed all in one. air handling. It's a large treatment unit that allows us to disperse volumes of air to different spaces. And then there's cost delta differences between them.
Basically like a window unit versus for that specific room versus a centralized air unit. perhaps.
In a sense, yeah. Yeah, in a sense.
Now you brought up, you know, if we chose not to do this, we'd be either drawing the budget back or identifying other projects of need. What, I know it's a subjective question, but, of potential projects, would there be anything that would be a higher priority to these units? And or would it be advantageous, knowing we have 6-month lead time either way, to push this a few months into the school year to where if something were to arise, we would have this budgeted money to go after something similar? I just think about at, you know, Maple where the roof was leaking. If we had something like that come up, could that jump in priority over these rooftop units? That's just,
Yeah, a couple things drove this, the number of work orders, so the number of man hours that are made spending on these units, and then spending operational costs out of Fund One. And so Fund One funds a lot of our instructional costs. It funds, you know, support staff. And so, you know, we're spending a lot of money out of Fund One trying to repair the contents in the room.
Yeah.
And so because of the contents in the room, having issues is one of the reasons why we really wanted to
the
push this
cost.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That's good.
With these, I guess my question is priorities on capital outlay. Understand that we went through the exercise of lining out what we would like on future bonds. But I don't remember seeing a priority list of other capital outlay. And I'm interested in knowing what that looks like. And as far as high school units, are these the only 2 units? What's their age? How many other units? We have issues at the high school and so forth. I guess I'm not educated enough on this subject matter to know as far as what our priorities are, because I don't think I've seen that list since I've been on the board, if that list exists. We know that we got into a pretty spirited conversation about high school bathrooms, right? And the need for that. But again, I don't think we have I've never seen an entire list of capital needs. When we walk the high school, you know, furnishings and classrooms, obviously that's been neglected for several years. Where's that on our priority list and stuff like that? I'd be interested in knowing what that looks like, because this is, I think, the first time I've seen that we needed 2 high school units out of all of our conversations about HVAC going into the bonds. I don't remember having a conversation about HVAC units for the high school. So I'd be interested to know what that capital outlay priority list looks like, and more conversation about what we're going to spend and how we're going to spend it in the future. So.
Yeah, so our 10-year master plan had a smorgasbord of list of different items that we had for this. You know, we did have this on the last board agenda item. And so with Eagle Heights having all new units, obviously it's a new building, Maple being renovated and new units on that. The middle school and Horizon through this bond project having new HVAC units, and not seeing the ability to use savings or wanting to do a whole project around HVAC and looking more at facilities to try to get ahead of ourselves and do a couple units at a time with the same philosophy that we do for roofs. So this is just something that we do with roofing that we would with HVAC, is look at the ones that have the highest issues of work orders, man hours. With this situation, these are 2 units that are causing other issues and things that we're having to spend money on to repair different things. And so if you look at every single unit in the district, these are the 2 that are giving us, cost us the most money and give us the most issues. And so.
I understand that. I'm just saying, where is it in the priority list? What else is on that priority list? Because again, if I just use the example of walking through the high school, you know, we had a huge conversation about bathrooms, right? And that wasn't on any kind of list before, but we resolved those matters. And then of course, you know, looking at the classrooms at the high school, right? You know, just thinking about the student experience in the classrooms and when we're going to update those, right? And obviously other restrooms in the high school. I don't know what that list looks like. Is that number 10 on the list? Or is it number 20 on the list? Or is it a part of a bond issue in the future? I don't remember seeing those, right? But this is, you're saying this is Fund 4 money.
Mhm.
So obviously there seems to be a plan for some of these smaller projects to get funded. And that's all I'm asking for is
Yeah,
what
so the-
that priority list looks like.
Sure. So the plan is every year to do some roofing sections and some HVAC sections going through. So that would be continual. Every single year I'd bring you those. And then, of course, the things you talk about are more done through bonds and project savings. And I still believe we will have some project savings out of this. So we'll be able to address some things like you talked about. I know our community meeting that we had last year, we invited the community to come in and evaluate. We had additional items on there. Some of those things that came up was like the high school foyer and some other restrooms and things like that. And so those were on that list and slotted for 2026.
Have we ever done a asset management plan and looked at our critical assets and said, over time, here's life expectancy, here's degradation, and
Yeah,
their funding strategies, like this will go to a bond, this will go to just operational dollars.
we do have all of our assets in School Dude, which is our maintenance program. So we do all of our preventive maintenance, which automatically creates work orders on those. So when they do that, they're also looking at conditions, reporting back. And so that's where we'd like to get to, is where we have that. So we're doing all of our roofs and HVACs on a continual basis, and we're looking for more facility improvements like Scott was talking about through bonding projects.
Robert, is it your vision to, I know when I came last year, there was somewhat a grid of each of the buildings and how that roof, there were some were red, some were yellow, some were green. Do you envision that same type of piece for HVAC? Do you envision something similar
That's what we're-
to those, to speak a little bit to Scott's
Yeah,
point?
so that's
too?
what we're wanting to move to, is just, and you guys might have seen some of our roofing plans in the
Yeah.
past of what we have, where it's green, yellow, and red, depending on the age.
Mhm.
And so what we need to do upcoming for the year. And so, yes, that's what we're looking to get to with HVAC. We're in a good spot because of just doing all of the middle school on Horizon. So we feel like if we can stay on top of the high school, we don't, in my opinion, don't want to go out for a GO bond because the high school is so large, $7 or $8 million for just HVAC at the high school. We want to use that money for some sort of facility that our kids are learning in. So if we can stay on top of this and do this continually, I feel like we won't be in that situation again where we'll have to do that.
Is that pretty typical strategy though for education to kind of let deferred maintenance stack up and then they use some type of bonding capacity to knock it out?
Depends on the district and depends on what time of savings you have in the past. It's what we did in the past is use savings for things like HVAC or other elevators or whatever additional list you have of items, ancillary items that you deem important at that time.
So as perspective of two other districts that I've worked in, the hope was never to have to put deferred maintenance on a bond. So where I was, North Kansas City, over the last 5 years, passed two over $120 million bonds. Some of those pieces have deferred maintenance, but to get to that point, they had to pass a $20 million bond that was only deferred maintenance. It was a whole different time, to the point where it was really rough. So I think every district, if you ask them what would they prefer to do, take as much deferred maintenance costs out of that and just it be part of what you do, versus, all right, because what happens if that doesn't passes, right? Like,
Yeah.
If the middle school and Horizon, if that bond wouldn't have passed, we would have had to have been addressing that. We couldn't have gone another 2 years or 3 years to put that bond out again. So I think it's a mixture of both. To Robert's point, when districts, both in Columbia and North Kansas City, when I was there, ran deferred maintenance bonds, it was not like a high point of the district. It's when you get to build new things and you get to do those things. So I think the ultimate goal is to move that off to the side and be able to do I hate to say funner things, but
Yeah.
HVAC's not much of a splash when it's on a bond.
But to Scott's point, having that list.
Yeah.
As we
Think we-
move into a budget season this winter and in early spring, be helpful to apply that and be able to pick and choose. And obviously HVAC's, like you pointed out, is not the most exciting thing to look at, but there's possibly things on that list that, maybe we need to move up. So.
Right, and I mean, the conversation about the bond issue last time was, we did actually move up all those HVAC projects from the 2027 bond up to the current bond, right? So we should be ahead of schedule
Yeah.
in theory, right?
Yeah.
And being able to utilize Fund 4 funds for HVAC
Mhm.
projects and
Sure, yeah, right,
some other
right.
stuff that goes on in our schools. I think it's,
Doing something
You're good.
boring and something a little bit more exciting together. Sure.
So Robert, you mentioned 20 to 22 week lead time,
Mhm.
Ideally, trying to get this done by spring. If we put this on the September agenda and brought forth that list and kind of reviewed the master list and in conjunction with this at that time, would we still be able to hit your timeline?
I don't know. We really are trying to target that spring break to get it installed because we have to, again, bring cranes in, evacuate folks. If we don't hit spring break, we're going to have to wait till June to do this. So I just can't answer that question.
Yeah, no, when I think about criticality, HVAC's a huge one, followed by electrical infrastructure and
And the purpose of honestly bringing it to last board meeting in August was hoping to flush out some of these things. And so if someone needed a list or anything like that, of HVAC or the evaluation that BCS did on our high school units, I'd be able to,
And we
have
I
that.
mean, we really need the units here before spring break to confidently plan all that. I mean,
Yep.
just thinking in my head, if we wait till September, 6 months is March.
I
so
can't,
it's-
it may make it, it may not. I
Right.
don't, 6 months is an estimate based on their
Right,
their schedule. So I don't know.
but
This is
ideally
about-
we'd have them, we want them before spring break.
Our goal is to install them over spring break. So that way they're ready to go when the hot humid season hits May, June, July, instead of waiting till school's out and then having to do it in June when.
is there any other critical infrastructure that's subjected to having a need related to mechanical, electrical, plumbing?
There's not. This is the biggest need, and that's why I have it on this year's agenda as a major capital fund for project. Yes, there are things on the 2026 bond that definitely, need work. Obviously, the high school continues to need upgrades. Besides the stage, besides the gym and the restrooms across from that. But that hasn't been defined yet. It's been defined at the high school foyer and the entry areas, but what exactly about that needs to change? I think needs, a lot of input from high school staff. I think it needs a committee together to figure out how high or medium that goes.
Yeah.
Based on what they see the future of the high school to be.
So this is about 240, you said, Fund 4, and this line item had
380 right now. Yeah.
380 in it, or is the other 140 kind of the project?
We're looking to do a roofing project too, as well as the high school for this year to stay on our plan with Trimco. And so those two things together would be part of that 380. Once we get that bid, it might need to be tweaked a little bit in the budget revision because we're estimating what those, bids would be. But that's why the 380 number is in there to
And
accommodate.
These RTUs are just, your corrective work orders are, that's why you pick these. 'Cause
Yep.
you're chasing them.
Correct. So BCS came in and evaluated every single HVAC unit we had in the district. Obviously, Horizon Middle School taken care of. Eagles brand new with VRF. And then you have Maple, which is mostly new with VRF, some existing systems, but a lot of the need in that area was done in 2018. And then you have the high school, which has a lot of issues with their HVAC in some areas. Would like to see the library done because that has humidity issues as well. And we have a lot of value in books and things in there. That was probably the next one that we need to look at. But this one was just causing a lot of expenses operationally to repair equipment, wardrobes. For example, next year we need to replace all of our band uniforms. Our band uniforms are probably going to be about $100,000. I'm just going to bring that up now. And so if we have humid areas with $100,000 for the band uniforms, so mildew and those things getting on them, having to clean them, that's going to be a big bill every year because we just can't bring the humidity out of those rooms because those units don't have humidity controls when they were put on in the late 90s.
To me, it does make sense to do these in deferred because what I think has happened is we depended on that for a long time, but it got us so far behind and it was so bad at those schools that haven't been done that I think it got out of hand to me. I mean, I don't know the mechanics and all this stuff, but to me, to keep up with this deferred maintenance and to do these things and not have to depend on the bonds and everything makes sense. But
I'm okay to make a motion to approve as requested, but I do think, to Scott's point, I think a master asset management plan, which you have, it's pulling that data over and then looking holistically at anything related to mechanical, electrical, or plumbing, its associated deferred maintenance over its lifespan would be helpful, because then you can look at it, prioritize it against architectural design enhancements and say which one has more weight. And then you can start, it gives the board a chance to help prioritize with you.
Sure.
If this is, if this is what's budgeted,
Hang on,
there's still more.
sorry,
Yeah.
procedurally, we've got a motion. I'll second it so we can then go to discussion. Sorry. I don't care. who
Further
wants to go.
discussion. Go ahead,
Uh,
Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, if this is what's budgeted and identified, I'm good with that. And then to Scott's point, having a list to look at into if and you point out there is more money in there. So if we were to get that list, say, oh, wow, this really stands out, we could evaluate it against the other budgeted projects if
So-
we need.
Question for you. You're looking to not do HVAC units continually year to year and kind of skip years versus different projects within schools? I mean, we can continue down the same road that we went before, where we're using and waiting for bonds to.
No,
to
I think
wholesale.
what
I
you'll
wouldn't come
find
into
by
it.
this exercise, Robert, is there might be some outliers like your hydraulics on your elevators and stuff like that would be looped in, but you'll still have the opportunity in HVAC.
Sure.
Every organization you go
Right.
to, that's high.
Sure. And a lot of those things you guys are mentioning are not talked about when we get together and do facilities reviews, right? We bring our community in, it's things like turf on the baseball field. It's,
Right.
stadium
Extra
enhancements.
stuff, yeah.
If it's not the hydraulics on the elevator, those type things that do come up for issues.
And on this subject matter, if that was a part of our discussion during the bonds that we just did, and I knew that we had to have 4 more units at the high school, I probably would have argued that we had included those 4 more units at the high school in the previous bond. But we didn't have that information because there was a lot of conversation about getting as many HVAC units done on that bond issue as possible. So
Or just,
again, just like, I'm just saying, for instance, if
Okay.
I had an asset listing with a capital outlay that said these 4 units at the high school are also an issue, right? I'm saying, and we'll just go back to your point of just having 2 units,
Mhm.
our current issue at the high school. I would have argued last year at the bond
Mhm.
conversation to put those 2 high school units on there.
Mhm.
That's what I would have argued.
sure.
If I'd have known that was a major need.
Right.
So.
You do have the bonding capacity to think about. So that's one thing. You can only fit so much
We can-
in there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but I mean,
Certainly
when
something
we were having that
Sure. Yeah,
conversation
to
about
fit those in, to force rank them, you
the
would have force ranked that.
gymnasium, the bonds and all that
Sure.
stuff. So yes, I would have probably that probably would have weighed on my decision.
Gotcha.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion carries 7-0. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you. And I would just like to, we can work on that over and give you guys an update next month. I just don't want to overpromise that.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, understood.
you're asking kind of a big task there. And I know that roofing, the deferred maintenance on roofing took a significant amount of
And
time.
it's,
So
it's.
we'll get that to you.
continually changing.
Yes.
A good rain and a lightning strike will change your prioritization list.
All right, for the last time, 11.4, SURSIP, the safe return to in-person learning and continuity of services plan.
Yes, I know everybody's excited. This is the last time we have to see this plan. But we are required to look at it again one more time, bring it up in public. So the changes I highlighted in your memo, you see that it runs out September 30th, and I'm still entertaining the questions that you might have. It's just, we are treating this like any other illness, and so we're following the same protocols as we would anything else. So
Who's going to miss voting on this?
I make a motion that we approve that for the last.
I will second that. There's no further discussion. I think we're all done discussing it.
Whitney,
Yep.
it
Vote.
feels
Done
right
that.
that you
Done
made the
that.
motion.
Good times.
okay.
Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda, 11.5 School Resource Officer Agreement for the 2023-2024 school year.
And annually, we update our MOUs, our memorandum of understanding, their contracts with our contracted partners. So as you see, this one was 2022 through 2025. And again, there's some language in there that reflects that. But otherwise, we just wanted to update our contract with the city for our school resource officers, and you've had an opportunity to look, so I'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Yeah, just for anybody that reads the contract, it leaves a possibility of a second SRO instead of permanent placement, which we have a permanent placement second
Yep.
SRO, so.
We do have 2 SROs, so just so the public knows, we have one that's dedicated primarily to secondary, one dedicated primarily to elementary, but however they take turns and they go anywhere that's needed. It's been a great addition. Of course, we've worked with the city that if they ever have additional officers, we'd be interested in entertaining a third or a fourth, so. That right now, I actually have a meeting set up with our SROs for Friday morning, because we like to meet prior to the start of school, and so that's something we have set up to go through expectations and the year ahead.
Yeah, just my only comments to add is just please share our gratitude with those individuals. What they do is incredibly important for our kiddos and our community, and we're just glad that the continued partnerships there. So with that, I'd make a motion that we approve 11.5 is.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, please vote.
While you're voting, I should have said, Mr. Mendoza learned how to do magic, so because the elementary kids really like.
Well, I saw him out today. If I see him again, I'll see what he can do, so. Excellent. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda, 11.6, approval for bills for payment for August 2023. This was pulled out of consent agenda. There's a reimbursement for Mrs. Whitaker in here. We did ask for clarification. Theoretically, we could vote on this because we're reimbursing, like Susan could vote on this because we're reimbursing for actual expenses incurred. But as there might be a question on funding ourselves, best practice is to not do so, hence we pulled it out. So with that clarification, I would entertain a motion to approve 11.6. I'll make a motion to approve 11.6. Do I have a second?
Who was the second?
Second one popular.
Sorry, Susan.
Yikes.
No one wants
I could,
Whitney?
Scott gave it away to win.
Oh,
all right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote and or abstain. All right, motion carries 6-0 with Mrs. Whitaker abstaining. Next on the agenda, 12.1.
So the only thing that actually was held in miscellaneous was just if there needed to be any further conversation from our 4 to 6 retreat. I feel like we got to a really good stopping point. We have some work to do that we'll bring back to you on September 20th. The only other thing I would share is convocation was today. I appreciate those that were able to attend. I thought it was a great experience. Did not realize how spirited the Spirit Stick would be, but it is a very spirited competition. I would like to thank Kim and her team and the entire central office team for chipping in, making sure everything went well. Walking tacos were extremely popular. The Spirit Stick, there was a lot of great.
Can we get a
Great.
Yeah, was there an appeal?
I agree.
I only
We're expecting this to come to the board and video review.
just my comment is that needs to be a board review. That's a board level decision.
Board video review.
Yeah.
We have no videotape, so sorry.
I think the umpire blew the call, so,
Angel Hernandez.
yeah.
No, it was just congratulations. Thank you, Ken. That's tireless. Thank you guys for getting your staffs. It's great to see them all dressed up in their matching shirts for the day. It was fantastic for a first timer at Smithville Convocation. It was a great experience.
And Dr. Moss, we did provide the board with t-shirts that we
Thank you.
gave to all of our new staff members this year. So we wanted to make sure you got one as well.
Kim,
Appreciate
did I
it.
get the big guy size? Did I get big guy size?
The largest size.
Thank you.
Let us know.
Dr. Moss, I have a question. So, as you work on the 90-day outlook, do we pause on developing the further year kind of scope and consideration? Do we wait until the 90-day task has been completed? How do you want to do that? My fear is we wait 90 days, we solidify that, takes us another 2 months to get together. Now we're looking at a month time frame on something we could have projected and been intentional about.
No, and this will be a good check for that. So I looked at the feedback that you guys give, kind of that, your statement, your rally cry, right? And then what that piece underneath it isn't just a 90-day goal, but is a piece that's throughout the year that we would do throughout the entire time, but we would have a measure within that 90 days of how we're progressing. I do believe that within that 90 days, we're going to find like natural extensions to it. And I would not want to wait another 2 months for us to get together. So I would say let me dig into it, get a little bit more information for you all. And it probably won't be in this Friday's update, but in the next one, push that out and we can get some feedback on as we further define and really make those goals a SMART goal over that year-long period versus that 90. But we'll bring those tactics and strategies, action steps back as a 90-day focus, not as a year, but work those more of that, the goal or finalize more wordsmithing of that piece as a full year goal. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then ability to tweak, obviously, and change and refine here.
Along that lines, you did see we tweaked the agenda a little bit and tried to include some teacher student celebrations. If you get feedback on that, please let us know as we kind of work to continue to do so. Great to see the smiling faces back at this table.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Moore, and all the smiling faces that were walking around this evening as we were in here meeting. So with that, if there's no other discussion, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So second.
I hear a motion and a second. If there's no discussion, please vote.
You think Evan's done a
We
practice?
stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
That's pretty good.
It is.
Pretty good.
Yeah,